Content warning. This podcast contains graphic descriptions of wartime events, including intense situations, injuries, and death. Listener discretion is advised. We are so happy to be speaking with legend veteran Richard Wickenhauser today, born to Joseph and Margaret Dixon Wickenhauser from Alton, Illinois. Just as soon as Rich graduated from Marquette Catholic High School at the age of 17, his parents signed for him to enlist in the United States Marine Corps. This is Diana Maul Halstead, the Kriegie's daughter, welcoming another legend of the Barbed Wire Hotel. Rich, it is a true honor to be speaking with you here today in your and my hometown.
Well, thank you.
Let's first talk about your family.
I had 5 brothers, no sisters. So there were 6 boys in our family, no girls.
That was a lot of tree climbing.
Yeah,
Now, are you the oldest?
I'm the second one.
Second one? Okay.
Yeah,
Who's the oldest?
Joe, a year older, and Ed is a year younger. And Gene is pretty close behind him. And they had a pause for about 10 years.
When did you decide you wanted to go into the military?
Probably when I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade in high school.
Like a freshman or sophomore?
Yeah. And I was looking forward to my graduation so I could get in. And even back then, I knew I wanted the Marines as the one to get into.
Now, why did you want to go into the Marines?
I can only tell you it sounded good to me. It was some of the achievements of the Marines. I liked, well, what little contact I had with them, which wasn't hardly anything. But I read about them, and basically that they were a very hard-hitting unit that I wanted to be a part of.
How old were you when you enlisted?
I had, well, I was 17, but within 3 weeks of being 18. And that was acceptable. Even then, because I was still 17, my dad and mom had to sign, which they did. Yeah. My dad was very patriotic. Joe was already in the
What did he serve in?
the Navy Air Corps, and Ed couldn't wait to get in the service. He was a year behind, and as soon as he was able, he joined up. And
Like a big military family.
yeah, Mom had 3 stars at the window, and then when I got in, she changed. They had some other star. I don't know what that was, but Ed came as soon as he finished high school. But as soon as he did, I was already overseas and in combat. But he went out and he enlisted in the Army. And I don't know in those days whether he could go in to the paratroopers upon enlistment, but it wasn't very long after he was in there that he wound up a paratrooper and did some jumps. And then that story about MacArthur coming back in I still remember the picture that they had on TV. He had a cane. He's wading in the water, coming ashore, and he's going to take back the Philippines. And so his troops landed and started a big fight with the Filipinos. And then Ed's unit came in behind him and dropped out of the aircraft and come in as a ground troop against the Philippines. And that broke their back. They couldn't handle it all. That's how MacArthur got back in. Yeah.
Where did you go to basic training?
Well, I would have been, well, if I went to that Farragut, Idaho, that would have been probably October of 43. It was up in Idaho, Farragut, Idaho.
What did you learn at that camp versus you eventually went to Camp Pendleton, right?
Yeah, I didn't really learn a lot. They did a lot of that. We were all rookies, and they did a lot of close order march. And
So you knew how to follow orders?
yeah, forward, halt, and just a lot of exercise so that you moved your whole unit. They moved right and then reverse. They on command, they just all did the same move.
I guess that's why they call it basic training, because it's basic stuff.
It's all, yeah. We did a little forced order march and maybe take a mile or two out into the boondocks and then do a reverse and come on back. That kind of stuff.
Was that because you enlisted in the Marines, but there was a situation where they wanted you to go into the Navy?
Yeah, that was up in Chicago. When you enlisted or there was a place in Chicago where they took you and sent you to the right place. And this old so-and-so decided that somebody had told him, we need more Navy that can go into the paratroopers. I mean, the Navy corpsmen, that they would be corpsmen. And so he got my buddy first, the guy enlisted with me, Joe Burns. He was up there arguing with him, and he didn't win. He didn't go very far. They just said, stamped it, you're going to the Navy. And he looked back at me and what could I do? You're in line. But when I got there and wanted to put me in the Navy, I said, no way, we're already in the Marines. And he said, this is their final stop. And it's my job to decide where you're needed in the military. And you're going in the Navy. Stamp that. I said, I'm not going. And that's when he told me.
And you were only 17?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of tough. And I said, or he said, see that cop over there? He'll have you in jail tonight. That's where you're going if you're not going in the Navy. And I looked at that and I thought, well, I can't solve this right now, not in the police department. So I said, I'll get out, don't you worry. And then he said, okay, you're going to Farragut, Idaho. Then I was sent to Balboa Park in San Diego. And technically I jumped ship. I got I went to lunch with the class. That was the last I saw of that place. Because I kept going to lunch or dinner or even breakfast where this bunch was going. So I had food to eat, but thank heavens it didn't rain because I was out on a park bench for 2 nights. And it was the third morning when I'm sitting there. I was awake, sitting on the bench that I'd slept on, and thinking, well, how can I get out of this mess? And these 2 young military policemen came up, and they didn't even wait to see my credentials. They just said, is your name Wickenhauser? I said, yeah. Richard. I told him, I said, my first name. I'm Richard Wickenhauser. Well, you're the one we want. You're under arrest. And I said, okay. I said, could I go down and get a little something to eat before I'd like a little breakfast. And I may not get another chance. He said, you probably won't. You'll be in jail. And they were nice and said, okay, we'll go with you and keep an eye on you. And don't try to run. I said, I'm not going to run. And I got a little breakfast. Not much, but it helped. And I came back to them, and they took me in. And that's when I asked them who's on duty, a Marine or a Navy captain. And they said a Navy captain, a Marine captain. Well, that gave me the opening I needed. And I just kept telling him, I want to fight. I've had a lot of experience with guns. I can shoot well. And I said, you get a hold of the guy that was supervising when our unit went to the rifle range, and we all shot. And you look at my record, and I would make a good fighting Marine. And I said, I'm not going to be very good at medicine because I have no interest in it. And he was very nice too. He said, well, you do belong in the Marines. And I told him what happened. He said, oh, some jughead. And so anyway, he just said, well, I'm going to try something. He said, I'm a captain here, so I have the control of your group. But I'm going to take you out of that and put you in, they're starting a new company basic training in the Marines in Camp Pendleton. And that was 2 days ago. He said this would be the 3rd day they'd be in training. We could get you up there this afternoon, and you could get in a bunk somewhere. They'd assign you a place to sleep and the unit to be with. And so that's what happened. They come by with an open air Jeep, and I was a passenger, but it was good highway all the way up to Camp Pendleton. I went in there, and The captain had not heard about it. I had a stack of papers that was to show him, and he said, "Okay, we got a new guy in company so and so, and you go over and report to." He had to look it up who the sergeant was in charge, and I did that. That was it. I went over and they issued me a bunk, and I was in there like anybody else.
What happened to Joe?
Joe was sent to the East Coast, and he got into a supply department. As far as I know,
Yeah.
still he got over, and then now he may have wound up in corpsman, but I think he stayed in supply. I met him right before we left for Iwo Jima. We were all put on board ship. We were going to have to live there for 42 days. We didn't know that. And so I was up playing poker on top deck. Nice sunny afternoon. I was making some money. And Joe came up. I said, "Where'd you come from?" He said, "Well, they're tying 4 ships together." And he said, "I had the position where I could get a guy who had the documentation of all the ships." And we went down the line for the names of everybody on one ship. That wasn't me. And then they went to the next one, and that's where they found my name. And so Joe, being Navy, we could not leave the ship. Marines had to stay put. But the Navy guy, and he came on over. And, well, I guess he still was in the Navy. Maybe he was corpsman, but I don't.
But they had the Navy and the Marines together there on that boat, didn't they?
They had the only the supply and the corpsman. The corpsman. Otherwise, we were all Marine only. And well, they had Navy cooks, people like that. And so that Joe and I had a little visit. He did me a big favor. I had $500 in cash from poker, and I said, "I don't know if I'll go into combat, if I'll come out, and I might as well get my $500 to Mom. Could you get it out?" And he said, "I guarantee you." Probably 2 months later, when I remembered the 500 and wrote a letter to Mom, "Did you get it?" And she said she had gotten it about a month earlier.
So you went from Alton, Illinois, to St. Louis, to Chicago,
Yeah.
to Idaho, to San Diego,
Yep.
to Camp Pendleton,
Yeah.
to a boat.
That was it.
And then the boat was on its way to.
Well, it had to come back to California because we were assigned to the Big Island. That's not the only name I ever heard
of Hawaii.
Yeah. And we were in training there for probably 2 or 3 months. Pretty rough training. One thing, if you had a night assignment where you went out into the boondock and tried to see where you wouldn't shoot your partner, but you could shoot the enemy. And every night, a cloud came by so low that our elevation must have been very high because we got rained on, and it was a drizzle like, but it got you good and wet every night that we were out in bivouac. We
What's bivouac?
Yeah, we would go out and get an assignment to maybe guard for 1,000 yards out there, set up a perimeter guard situation to stop any of the Japs from coming through.
And that's called bivouac.
Yeah, you bivouac because you stayed there all night. Part of your group were assigned to sleep in a pup tent, and the rest take the first 4 hours and then switch. But you crawl into a little pup tent and you're soaking wet. Not a great.
No, that would, no, I couldn't sleep.
It wasn't what I planned, but
Why did it take 42 days to go from California to Hawaii?
well, because every 6 minutes, the whole fleet moved to the left or to the right of their course. And then in 6 minutes, they moved to another course. And then another 6 minutes. Eventually, they got back, I'm sure, somewhere on the original line toward Ewell. But they lost time and mileage in between. But it was the only way they knew how to avoid a sub. It took over 6 minutes for the sub to get on as a target. So we moved the targets every 6 minutes. You couldn't see it in the dark of night because there was no lights. The Navy guys saw each other somehow, probably night goggles, I don't know. But to me, as a greenhorn, it was a real unusual experience that if the moon was out real good and bright, which it showed on the water and everything, then you could watch that whole fleet, hundreds of ships just moving.
Wow. I bet that was a sight.
It is.
I wish I would have had a drone back then. I could look down on all those boats.
Oh, yeah.
Jig-jagging.
It'd probably get shot down. That was one reason we were so slow. It probably was another reason the Navy ran out of food for us, because I'm sure the guy that figured, well, they're going from here to Iwo Jima. Well, that'll take so many days. And so that's the food you got. And he didn't put in all the maneuvering. So we were on very good bread and very good coffee and rancid jelly. You couldn't hardly stomach it. You usually passed it up. And we'd been on board and eating there for a month when they ran out. Oh, there was some cussing going on, because we could smell the bacon and eggs that the Navy had. Oh, no. They fed the Navy at a different time.
But they can't share it?
They didn't.
Oh, okay. They didn't.
I don't know. Maybe they had the same kind of measurement, and maybe they had a little extra supply? I don't know. I know that we could smell the bacon. You dirty so-and-so.
So you went over to Hawaii to practice?
Around a dormant volcano that was very similar to the one that we found on Iwo Jima. It didn't have many caves, had a few, and we worked and practiced on them. But if we'd had the one like was on Iwo Jima, it's loaded with caves. I got assigned about the third day. I got assigned to the backside of Iwo Jima and had to clean out caves. We had a tough time because they were interconnected, and you could get one cleaned out, but they could come back in anytime. And we'd get down there and the cave would fork, and there'd be 3 or 4 pathways to go in deeper. And it was very hazardous. You never, well, one, you could run into a Jap with a gun that could just take you out. But, well, you just had to do it. They wanted them annihilated. So we kept going in, and I'm sure we cleaned out several caves, but I got a hunch 24 hours after we left, they were filled with Japs. Because, well,
They just kept coming.
yeah, that's right. You could kill the ones that stayed close enough that you could get a shot at them. But a lot of them backed off, didn't confront you. You just tell them, you go back, hey, Sarge, yeah, I went as far as this thing until it forked 2 ways, and I didn't see anybody. Well, he said, they can come back in, I guess. Yep, they could. Well, try to set up a barrier. Have you got a private that would stay maybe a couple hours after we leave? Yeah. Well, let's see if we can lure them back. So we backed off, and they had a private up there with a BAR, a British automatic rifle. They're kind of like the guns that our troops have. And the troops today are much lighter. But the BAR was a killer gun, fully automatic. So he was told to stay still, don't say a word, don't answer anybody, nothing. And if you could get a half a dozen or so in one of those caves coming toward you, bring them in close enough, you can take care, annihilate them all.
So the goal was to get them to keep coming towards you.
Yeah.
So then you could take them out, and then get some more to come so you could take them out.
We wanted to try that first. They may have orders as soon as we leave to come in, and that would be a trick that would work at least some of the time in the early days. Pretty soon, the Japs would get the idea, and they wouldn't fall for it. I've seen it work once, and the guy come back all excited, and I don't know how many he had. He told us the number, and it was a good number. He said, I let them all get in that cave, walking single file down. before I opened up. And he said they all hit the deck. They hit the ground. And I could just go down the line and take them out. He said, and then he counts however many he thought he hit. And I don't know. It was better than just leaving it alone. I saw something worse than that. We had in our company on Ewell, we had one Navy radio man, and his radio was connected to 7 Marine Corps Corsairs fighter planes that were up in the sky over high enough to be out of range. And our radio man would call in and tell them, we got a smoke podge. It's smoking good. 100, maybe 500 yards south of us. Well, on the other side is something we can't get to them. They're too well fortified. They're costing us too many lives. And we need you to knock them out. And so we got the radio back. Okay, we'll be coming right over your unit before we fire. And we'll fire south of that smoke. And we got an okay on that, back and forth. They come over, it was like thunder, so loud, with all 7 really coming in full blast. Because at that low speed, they wanted enough forward speed to get on up and get out of there. And then we heard a little bit of psst, and from each wing on these Corsairs. And then on the other side of Smoke Podge, boy, they really covered it. But in the meantime, the Sarge was running around telling all of us, these are not shrapnel shells. These are concussion shells. Only. That's all. Their only effect is the concussion is so strong that it will paralyze the enemy. And you count how many ships come over, how many planes came over. When the last concussion wave comes back over us, we got up and ran like heck on the other side. And you're just shooting anybody that's exposed. And they were numb. I went up to a guy, they didn't have a tree over about high as this roof. And I went up there, and he was just sitting there. He had a rifle, but he just sitting there. He didn't even look at me.
Because of those concussion shells. Wow.
I felt bad.
Because they couldn't fight back.
That's my orders. But that was the first introduction. We had 2 concussions.
Jeez.
Yeah.
What was your greatest challenge about the military?
There were a lot, a pretty big number of minor challenges, and you may not think of it as a big challenge, but you got called out in the morning and you just got enough time to get your clothes on and show up in 5 minutes. And Lord, couldn't hardly get the latrine because it was packed with guys. And you wanted to go before you started out. You thought, I might be out there an hour or 2 hours. But anyway, the challenge was, yeah, you just had to get there in time. You tried like heck to do it. And in a way, it kind of made you mad because it could have been done a little bit more friendly and give you twice the time, then you didn't have to rush so much.
Yeah.
And so things like that were frequent, but that was part of the way they trained you to.
Did you have a problem with the lava, the dust?
I did have, which we all did, I had goggles. They weren't glasses, they were just goggles that wrapped around. And when you came in to come out, if you could see a mirror, some guys had a little mirror back on their bunk, and you go in there and look at it, and you could see
like
the
raccoon
outline.
eyes.
And that, for me, was very important. Now, some guys, I don't know how they did it, but they took them off and they got by.
Just that dust getting in your eyes and your nose and your mouth.
Had to.
Was it hard to walk in it?
Very hard. When they told you to run, which my orders when I landed was to ignore the dead and wounded in front of me, let the corpsmen take care of them, and keep on going until you can see water on the other side. Well, you were running halfway across that island. And
it's a long way.
You were in good shape, except you'd been 42 days at troop transport, and you couldn't do much exercise.
Oh, you couldn't exercise on the transport?
Well, where would you do it? Very crowded down below, and well, you might do a little exercise, but we didn't. I'll put it that way. They tried to bring us up on board on the top side on a calm day, and we would do a little close order drill for a few minutes, but they had such limited space that to get somebody else up there, I had very short time on exercise there. And I think they gave it up after a while. But as far as anything else, a major challenge.
Weren't you injured?
One evening, almost dark. It was a little beyond dusk, but we moved as a unit. We moved forward. We wanted to get to the end of the runway. I had captured, there were 3 airfields they had, and they had what you might call, in a small town, the airport. So we were going to take the runway and the airport the next morning and capture it so that they couldn't use it. And the strategy was to take the next one also and the next day. Now we could let our planes land on that first one and refuel if there was a gas pump there, which there was. And so we thought we were undetected. We were not. And they had a set of the base to throw a mortar. And they had a small mortar and a large. This one was, they had a bunch of all big mortars. And then at the right time, they fired them all, and then they moved them. Everybody had orders to move them so many degrees and fire them again. They were covering everything. And then they'd come back about halfway and shoot again. Well, we were getting plastered pretty bad. And all we could do was stay in a foxhole. I was in there, I looked up, and a guy came down. I knew he was hurt bad. He was just staggering. And when he got close enough, because it was pretty dark, but I saw the lower jaw was gone. I looked, I thought, that poor guy, he didn't know what's going on. He's so shocked. And I jumped up and went out, and it was maybe five or six steps to him. And I said, here, partner, let me help you. And he just gave up, just fell on my arm. And I drug him back, and I said, Bill, bud, let's take him in our hole. I said, I think he's gone, and I had one foot over the side of the hill, and the other was up like this, kind of, and a mortar dropped right there, and pow, and I had like here and here, the blood just started pouring, and right here was a huge, not only a wound, the bone itself was splintered, and this thing was wide open. My blood was just going like that. And this thing down here, from here on down, was just beat up, that's all. It was done. And so with that, Bud took his own life in hands. He jumped out of that hole, and we let the other guy slip down. He was dead anyway. And he pulled me out and said, he got out. We each had a battle dressing, and it's a big one. And he saw this one was the worst, and he was wrapping that. And I was trying to hold my battle dressing on both of these, and it wasn't working good, but we were trying to stop the blood. And then Bud was working down here, trying to stop the main flow, but it was, what he did here was compression.
Like a tourniquet?
Yeah, and that's all he could do. Tightened it as tight as he could. And then he got up, and these mortars were still dropping, and they'd changed the direction, and then all of a sudden you'd have him back here, and he's up there hollering, Corman, over here, Corman. And I'm laying down, I'm wide awake, laying down. I'm surprised I wasn't in shock, but I remember it so vividly. I thought, well, there's some poor guy that's going to he must be a corpsman. He was running toward us, huddled way over. And all the stuff that he was carrying, bouncing around on him, he just had a strap over his head or shoulders. And I thought, what? he's trying, but poor guy can't make it. They're going to get him. I thought sure they'd have him. And he ran through all of that and come. And when he saw me here, he just dove right in on me and immediately said, give me your left hand, he said. And he put it under here. And then he put my arm down. He said, hold your arm down tight as you can. And the blood stopped.
How about that?
The main thing.
I would have never, no.
Yeah, he knew. I didn't know anything. And so I held on to him. And then he set up plasma right away to replenish the blood somewhat.
This is all out in the battlefield.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Right out where, well, the darkness then saved us from, as soon as the mortar stopped, we were safe from there on. Nobody came out from the airport. They thought that was enough damage to us to stop us. Bud was standing up the whole time the corpsman's working on him, and he's hollering, over here, over here. And I'm looking up, and I think, what's he doing? Over here, over here. And then I heard this clank, clank thing turned out to be an amphibious tractor. They come in on their own, but they're, I guess they carried a few troops. I don't know. But anyway, they come driving up right to us. And Bud said, I need help to get him in your vehicle. And the two guys, big brawny guy, stepped out and ran over. And they were from here to that wall with the machine. And it's just still running, clankily. And they said, okay. Bud told him, he said, he's lost a lot of blood. Get him back to the beach. They'll have some medical set up for him. And he said, the guy said, oh, we know where that is. We've been taking people there all day. And he said, come on, we'll get him in. And they got me in. It was nothing but metal that I laid on. Wasn't comfortable, but it was safe. And they took me short. I don't know how long. It couldn't have been too far because it was, well, about anything around that. It was a small island.
Yeah.
So weren't far from anything. And he went right down there, and there was a little tent top and then aluminum post, and it was open on all sides, but it would have kept somebody out of the rain. And they just, there were two doctors there, one fairly mature, the other very young. And they both come in and helped take me out, set me on a stretcher they had sitting there. And then the amphibious tractor took off. And that's when the doctor started messing with this and that. They were setting up plasma and putting it on a bag above. And then they got another one that had a pump on it. They could pump the blood in. And I passed out. Yeah. And up to that point, I was wide awake. But I just, and so I woke up and it was dawn. And I said, morphine. Give me some morphine. The doctor came over. He said, he said, Marine, if I give you any more morphine, I'll kill you. I said, what are you talking about? You've been hollering for morphine all night long. Well, I didn't know it. I was sleeping. He said, well, you had your mind set on morphine. If we didn't give you morphine, you kept hollering more. And I hadn't called for it before they put me down and I went to sleep. He said, the problem, sir, is we don't know how much morphine you've had. And he said, there is a limit that you can absorb. Can you help me at all? I said, sir, I'm sorry, but I cannot. I remember that the corpsman gave me a shot of morphine, but I don't remember anybody after that giving me any morphine. He said, well, we'll have to go with that. So that's what, and
Wow.
they gave me another shot. And I told him, I said, I got pain, but it's not too bad. I can handle it. And he said, well, let's give you one more. And that's what they did. They gave me, only one shot when I was there. And then right out, it was hardly light. And out of the ocean, the Higgins craft came in. And he came in and dropped the nose of the boat right down on the sand, and then dropped the front part.
That folds down.
Yeah. And they come running aboard, being on a stretcher. And right away, they just grabbed it and put me right in the middle of that thing. I found out later I was going to be the only passenger. And they thought it was that critical to get me to the ship. Well, he went to the first ship, and the Navy, the guy up above, said, we can't take any more. We're over limit now. Try, and he gave him a number. He said, just around the bend here. Well, this was a different type of ship, and they had a lot of medical. He takes me to a troop transport. And so, yeah, it was empty. So they lowered a cable. When it got down here, there was 4 cables running off that were welded to it. And I'd never seen it before. But they took, each of these had a circle that was tight, and they ran that on the handle where the guy were used to bringing me in. Put that, one here, one here. They didn't tie me down. They just had that, and I'm watching that, and they said, all right, take it away. Holy cow, at least tie something. And so they kicked me all the way up, and all I could remember was the dirty, rusty sides of that ship. I thought, this is a disgrace to the Navy. So anyway, they got me up, put me down over the ship, and lowered me. And I saw all these hands. They had excess help, and all these guys are trying to get either a handle or sight of the stretcher, and they came down, and the captain came up and introduced himself. And we have limited facility, but we'll do the best we can. And all, okay, sir. How are you feeling now? I said, I'd like more morphine, but I don't think, I said, these papers that they gave me, these are, the doctors gave me these. They'll tell you when I can have morphine. And he just looked at me and he said, oh, not for a while. He said, what else, what could we give you? What could we get you? I said, well, and I'd never had a drink of hard liquor in my life. I had had some beers with the guys and that, but Dad didn't believe in drinking, and nobody on that farm drank. That's where I lived. So anyway, I said, I'd like a good shot of hard liquor. He said, told this guy, go to my cabin, it's in the lower something, and bring it in. They come in, and they poured me a big one. Oh boy, I choked. Yeah. What did you give me? He said, oh, that's good. That's good bourbon. I said, oh, okay. I finally got it down. And I thought, oh, I never drink that stuff. That's all I want. And I was about half loaded with it, but I was feeling pretty drunk. But that was the only drink I had. And then they took me down to on a stretcher. 4 guys took me all these narrow pathways down, over, down again, and we wound up on the bottom of the ship. That's where they were putting, they had the sick bay down. And he had 4 bunks. Oh, they were filled. He had about 6 people lined up. One of them was up, he had to walk up a small flight of steps. There was the last one. I think he had 13 and I was number 14. Poor guy was equipped to handle 6 or 4. That's where I sat for the rest of the war. I was moved. They took when Ewell was declared captive, then things like me and other people in different situations, our orders were to take this ship out to some other island that we had possession, and we had an airport on there. So they took me in there, and here come some guys to take me out. They had a Quonset hut, and inside the hut, the Seabees had built a one-room device that was packed real good all around so they could keep the dust out. And they took me in there and set me down next to their operating table. And then the 2 doctors looked at it and said, move him over, we're going to have to work on it. And then they took the stretcher back to their ship and they were gone, had other jobs. And that's when the captain said, after he had examined me, he said, well, I have good news and bad news, Mr. Wickenhauser. He said, which one do you want? I said, well, let's hear the good news. I haven't heard any for quite a while. He said, the good news is you're aware, I guess, that you've got gangrene. I said, I've seen my toe, my big toe. It had probably been at least 7 days since I got hit. Anyway, it was black as coal. And I said, oh, I can see that black toe. I knew it was gangrene. He said, you know, we're going to have to take your leg. I said, yeah, how far up? He said, well, I'm going to try to save the knee. You got a bad wound in the thigh that has the bones gone. We got to reshape it somehow. But he said, down below, he said, I think I can keep it below the knee. It's a matter whether or not we can preserve the thigh. I said, okay, what's the bad news? Well, he said, the bad news is we haven't anything to give you for pain. I said,
Oh,
that's going to be a pretty tough operation. He said, for you it will be. Jeez. He said, well, we've run out. He said, we've had a barrage of people sent down here. He said, we aren't equipped to handle that kind of traffic. But he said, we did the best we can. And we're going to go a little longer with you. But he said, we're going to start by taking this off down there. So they got to work, and I knew they had relieved the weight. I didn't know much else. And finally I said, wait a minute, what's all that noise? Well, he said, we got your leg off, but he said, we want to draw the skin that we can around the bottom of it and sew it so that when it heals, you can be fitted for an artificial leg. But he said, the noise is coming because we have to round out the bottom of the bone, and because it's going to take pressure. Yeah. And I'm thinking, good Lord, how'd I ever get here? So, okay. I can tell you this, more than once when I was alone, I was talking to God. Well, get me out of here. Yeah. And so, yeah, because I really feel very religious, and particularly in danger and in turmoil, is you got to call for God to help you. So anyway, make a long story short, they finished up and they found enough skin to pull down and get that. And then they kept me there about 3 weeks. And they were feeding me good, but finally they came up and said, we've got some metal to hold you up in this thigh thing. And we've got all the flesh, muscle tucked in, and we've sewed some skin around all of that. And he said, now, the last version, we're going to wrap it in cloth and then in plaster of care. What is it? Plaster. Well, it's what they use to make that big plaster cast around. And So here comes the other doctor. And this is gospel truth. I couldn't believe what they were doing. But because so much was shut out, there was a pocket pretty deep in where they sewed me up. And I looked down there, and it was a pretty neat little pocket. This doctor dropped, wasn't termites. It was those little.
Oh, they eat.
Yeah.
They eat.
That's it. I'll get it.
Maggots.
That's it.
Yeah,
maggots. You got it.
And they
maggots.
Go in and eat away the dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
He dumped that whole double handful right there. And the other doctor grabbed this gauze and wrapped it around to keep them from crawling out. They couldn't get out after he put the gauze around them. Funny, they could eat flesh, but they couldn't
You can't eat cloth.
Yeah. But anyway, they got that. Then they brought in the plaster of Paris, and they wrap it, put that wet stuff on there, to where they finally had a big hard cast to protect it. And they said, you're going to be have that on you for quite a while. If it gets uncomfortable, let us know. Well, I never did tell them, but the problem was every time I moved a little, I'd kind of push a little air out. Stinking maggots. And about 8 weeks later, I was gone from there, and they had cut out the plaster and picked up all the maggots, put them back in a box. I said, what are you going to do with those? Going fishing? And no, we're not going to fish with them. We're going to use them on another guy that needs them. I said, you mean you just take one to another? Yep, nothing to it. And I never heard of it. He said, well, we'd heard of it, but we never did it till we got this job. And so once the stink got out and it was gone, I could at least move. And they wanted me to keep my knee moving a few times every day. And I would do something like that, and didn't have a leg there, but it was very easy, the little stump I had. So that's the way it was until shortly after that, a couple days, they picked me up and carried me out to a big B-24. And they carried me inside, and from the roof of the B-24, there were 2 cables that came here. Then they had a little device that hooked onto each corner to this cable. And that's the way I came back to the United States. And every time he would bank, we had to have fuel. We landed in Hawaii for refueling, and it was a beautiful day. I said something about it, and the pilot said, well, let me get some help here. He hollered somebody, and the 2 of them took my stretcher, took me out and set me down outside the plane. Enjoy Hawaii sunshine. And so I did. And wasn't very long, 2 guys came up, and they hadn't been on the plane. And they said, we're looking for Wickenhauser. I said, well, you got one. I said, you Richard? Yeah. Good. We've been looking for the last week for you to come through. I said, where the hell did you get my name? He said, well, it's a long story. I'll make it short. Do you know a Margaret Dixon? I said, yeah, that's my mother. He said, well, your mother, and I've forgotten her first name, but it was Roberts. I said, oh, yeah, they play cards together in a card party. Well, your mother told the Roberts woman that you'd be coming back home soon. She thought you'd be brought in by plane and just wondered if he'd stopped. And so he said they got word to us to keep an eye on the airport in case I came through. And he said, we never expected you out here. We were going to check the plane, see who you had.
Sunbathing.
Yeah. And then the other guy said, well, you're going to be here probably at least a half hour, maybe more. So in the meantime, what can we get you? I said, well, I don't know. Don't really need anything. How about some ice cream? I said, well, you got a winner there. I haven't had any for 2-3 years. And he said, well, just sit tight. We'll be right back. They came back with enough ice cream for 3-4 guys. That's everything. I had a sundae I had to eat right away, and they had a malted milk of some sort sitting there, and they had a cup that held 2 ice cream cups or cones, and they had ice cream in them. And boy. So I kept eating as fast as I could. And they talked a while, asked a few questions, but mainly just let me eat. And said, oh, they're starting to crank up, I think. They're getting ready to go. He said, your next stop is, at that time, I don't think Hawaii was in the States. Maybe it was, I don't know. But your last hop is to get you over to the good old USA. I said, boy, it sounds good. I said, give me one of those ice cream cones, and I'll thank you both for all the good. And I got the name of the guy whose mother had written him that her friend said that I'd be coming through. And that name was Roberts, and had his first name. I've forgotten it now. And the guy that owns Roberts Ford is the son of the guy that brought me that ice cream. And that became something Roberts. I can't think of it. He was the first motorcycle policeman the Alton Police Department ever had. But and he had children, which Sam Roberts sits next to me at church every Sunday. Yeah, and that is well,
Jeez.
it's a small coincidence, but yet somebody, my mom, had the presence to. Her card playing friend had mentioned that her son was in Hawaii, and that he saw somebody on a plane that her mother knew. And that gave Mom the idea, see if you can get him.
How old were you at this time now?
I was still 19. I got hit when I was 19. And the process of getting me home, uh, which was done always in my own, was probably including the plane flight, which was pretty direct. Couple months to get me back. Yeah.
But your mom was glad to have you home.
Yeah. And I'll say one thing I've omitted. While I was there where they had worked on this with the little squirrely things and whatnot, they had me in a room with a lot of guys, but I was off to my side. Most of them were pretty healthy people. And this lady came up and she said her name, and she said, "I'm with the American Red Cross. And my specialty, that's the reason that I'm here, is helping people like you write a letter." I said, "Well, can you get a letter sent from here?" She said, "Absolutely. We have a daily pickup of our mail." I said, "Well, I would sure like to do it." So we sat down. It's the only time I shed a tear about my leg. When I knew my leg was off, they cut it off. I just didn't bother me. But when I thought I'm going to tell mom and dad, I said, boy, it's going to be tough because I know how they'll feel. So she sat down. I still have that letter. And I had a letter written earlier when I was on the first ship that after I got hit, where they brought me down there and the guys all helped put me down, and the corpsman was overworked, and I was worried about mom and dad finding out. And that time I just said to the corpsman, "I know you're busy. Could you write a short letter for me? And whenever you get to a place where you could mail it or get it mailed, just send it." He said, "I'll do it, but it's got to be a short one. I'm really overworked." I said, "I know you are." And that's a very short. I just said, "I have some stiffness in both hands from an explosion, but no real big problem. But that's why I'm not writing this letter." And I said, "Somebody's writing it for me." And she wrote a very short little that my hands were slightly injured, but they're fine now. And he'll be writing a letter very soon. That was it. That's a little short. I got that back. Mom saved both of them.
I do want to thank you for your sacrifice.
Well, thank you.
You went and did it all.
Yeah, I did.
And it was, you were fighting for our country, our freedom.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I went in with that without any question. And I paid a price. But at that time, it wasn't a matter of paying a price so much. It was a matter of doing what you're told to do to help stop the enemy. We were after the Japanese. We didn't call them that. We called them Japs and dirty Japs, all that stuff. But we were out to kill them. So the rest of it was circumstances that I found myself. And what are you going to do? Well, you go with the flow. They got to fix your leg. And then after I got home, or back in the States, well, I was taken to the Navy. The Marines have all the Navy medical. So I was sent to the medical hospital in Philadelphia, which was the National Amputee Center for the Navy. And the Marines went with the same way. So I get in there, and I may have told you this one before, but of all the shocking things that I ran in, I was put in a very big place, probably held 30 to 40, maybe more. Everybody in a separate bed. Everybody was an amputee, both Navy and Marine. And the guy next to me, I looked, oh, I can't believe it. 4 amputee, 4 extremities gone. Wow. No arms, no legs. Wow. And when you see that, you just can't hardly believe. So I didn't know. I had no training how to handle. So I just became just me. And I kind of swung down. I had the one leg I could stand on and let the other dangle. And I looked over at the guy and I said, "Hey, partner, you're awake, aren't you?" "Yes, sir, I am." I said, "Well, I just wanted to introduce myself." Told him my name, where I was from. He told me where he's from. And I said, "Man, you really got clobbered. How in the world did you lose 4 extremities?" He said, "A big fire. Fire took both of them, the arms and legs." And I said, "Well, I don't know what in the world I could do, but if you tell me I could do something to help you, I'd be doggone glad to do it." He said, "Well, if you don't mind," he said, "usually the corpsman comes by, but he's busy. I wish you could come over, get my cigarettes and light one for me." I said, "Well, I can do that." I hopped over. It wasn't very far. I hopped over to his bed. And I said, well, he couldn't hand me a cigarette. I had to go around the bed, hopping, and got him. I said, "We'll leave him over on this side." Or he said, "Hell, put him on your side. Put him on your table." And so I light one. I never smoked, but I light one. Give it to him. You can. And I thought, as I started to give it to him, I thought, where do I give it to him? And finally, I just put it right in his mouth. All you could do. And he took a big puff, blew it out. And he was trying to hold on to it. I reached over, got it, took it out for a minute, finished his getting rid of the smoke. He said, "That is something you need to do, buddy." He said, "Once I take a big draw, you could take that out of my mouth. It'll help me a little." And I said, "Okay, take it out." Boy, then a big draw, and he'd blow a lot of smoke, but he could smoke. That's all he could do. I said, "How about a drink of water?" "Well," he said, "the corpsman does that too." And he usually brings, he's got some kind of a straw. And he said, let's just wait till the corpsman comes. He may have an idea. I don't know. And the corpsman didn't. He just said, no, I've got a glass and a straw. And if you want, I can leave it with you. I've got more. Okay. So I was in there at least a month, maybe two. I don't remember that well. But what they did was put us all in there. A doctor got to they'd take you out for a couple hours where a doctor could examine this, and then the artificial limb guy could look at what he had to fit to. And then they'd each make appointments later, and they were so booked, might be a month. And then you go into the doctor, he'd check your stump, look at any stitches that are in there, whatever, and say, I think you're ready to be fitted. He said the swelling is still a little bit on that stump. And you tell the guy that's going to put your leg together, you tell him that there's some swelling. And well, the corpsman didn't like that. He said he's supposed to wait till the swelling's down. And he said, I'll make it just a little bit smaller than it would be normal. So he went ahead, measured this and that. I'm standing there, and we'll stand still. Well, hell, I'm on one leg, you know. And we got along all right. But anyway, he did his measuring. And I go back, and it's a week or two, they call me. Somebody hauls me out on my bunk and my bed, I guess. And then he had one for me to fit in, see how that would feel. Well, you don't really know if it feels. True. It's so sensitive. And but we got along, and that time I didn't walk, but a week later I was back, and that one he said, no more crutches. You're gonna walk. I said, okay. He said, come out here. And I hopped out. He said, your hopping days are over. I remember that. And I was so relieved to hear it because I was sick and tired of hopping. So I said, he said, all right, you can take your pick. Take a good leg or the other one, whichever one you want to walk on. I said, well, I'll try this one first and then bring the next one along. Yeah. Oh, okay, that went out. This one went out, and I went straight forward all the way down to the floor. My first step. I looked at it. I said, that wasn't too good, was it? He said, I'm glad you didn't hurt yourself. Anyway, he said, well, get up. We're going to try it again. I said, you know, if you held on to me, I think for one step, I could do it. So he held on, and that one went very well. It was a matter of balance. I had lost it all. And then trying to lift it up, I had to think, lift this up. Yeah. And it was a kind of an awkward thing, but it was fun to the extent that I was relieved that some day soon I'll be walking this. It makes you try hard. And I would go, he let me take it back to my bunk. And he said, don't have any walking going unless you have the corpsman nearby. And but he said, you should not be falling. It wasn't too long, and I was hobbling along. Then when they got the Patricia Stevens models came in on Wednesday from 1 to 3. I remember. And 20 of us were sent down there who had leg amputations. And we tried to dance with this gal a while, talk to her about having lunch sometime. No, so she wouldn't do it. Okay. And I got a hold of another one, nice looking gal. They were all very nice, about our age. They were young. And nobody could get a date.
Rich's story may not have ended with a date with a Patricia Stevens girl, but soon after his release from the Marines, he met and married Lorraine Lawler, February 1st, 1947. Together, they had 5 children. After his wife's death, he married Dorothy Spooner, May 30th, 1986, where they danced up a storm until her death. Rich was a well-known insurance agent and risk manager in Alton, but since childhood, his passion has always been skeet shooting and quail and dove hunting. Rich started shooting at the age of 14. In 2010, he made the senior super veteran Illinois state team, and his greatest performance was at the 2006 U.S. Open in Kansas, where he placed 13th in the class. Over the years, he has placed first, second, and third in countless events, and as of this interview, he still shoots competitively several times a week. Rich, you are a true legend. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your sacrifice for our country and the freedoms we enjoy today. If you are a veteran, or if you know someone who is, I urge you to share your story. Whether you fought in battle or worked behind the scenes, your experience matters. It's not just history, it's our history. It's a history we cannot afford to lose. At Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel, we are committed to preserving these stories, but we need your help. Subscribe to this podcast, share it with your friends and family, and most importantly, if you have a story to tell, reach out to us on social media or email. Both are listed in our description. Every veteran story deserves to be heard, remembered, and honored. So join us in this journey. Together, we can ensure that the legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel live on. This is Diana Maul Halstead, the Kriegie's daughter, signing off. Thank you for listening, and to all veterans, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service and your sacrifice. If you would like to purchase a copy of my dad's memoir, Writings from the Barbed Wire Hotel, click the link in the description. In the back of almost 800 pages is an index of all the sources I used to research my dad's military career and time as a prisoner of war. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Let's spread the word and keep these stories alive. And remember, every story matters, especially yours. Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel was written by and produced by Diana Maul Halstead, the Kriegie's daughter. Until next time, this is Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel. Stay safe, stay strong, and never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. And before I go, a little update on my lovely assistant, Princess Olivia. Thanks to her BFF, Karma, she is now demanding treats from 3 Dog Bakery. They are Lick and Crunch cookies. What will she demand next for all her hard work? Amazon, add to cart. I still crack myself up. Thanks for listening.